Hi, everyone. I'm Vladimir Jutit. We are watching all the news happening in the United States and around the world. Check out the screens behind me. There is breaking news all over the country. If it rises to the level of importance that it requires your viewing here at CBS News 24/7, we're going to bring it to you live. Let's begin with the entire U.S. economy, which can be impacted as tens of thousands of port workers strike from Maine to Texas. What you need to know about the standoff and how it will impact your goods. Plus, overnight, a dramatic escalation of the conflict in the Middle East. Israeli troops begin a targeted ground incursion in Lebanon. Now, there is word Iran may get involved. But we are going to start right here at the CBS News Broadcast Center, where the only vice presidential debate will be taking place in just a few hours. Both candidates will arrive here this afternoon ahead of the high-stakes event. Take a look at tonight's stage for the candidates. The event will be live at 9 a.m. Eastern and will last 90 minutes. CBS News polling shows that's not right. It's going to be 9 p.m. tonight. Is that right, Eric? Okay, great. 9 p.m., because we want people not tuning in at 9 a.m. when they say, Vlad told me the debate was starting this morning. It is at 9 p.m., folks. It's going to last 90 minutes. CBS News polling shows both vice presidential candidates are described as generally competent among registered voters. Tim Walz is seen as truthful by 49% of voters, while J.D. Vance is seen as truthful by 45%. CBS News campaign reporter Aaron Navarro joins me now with a preview of the debate. He is in the spin room, which is right across the hall from the debate site, right here at the broadcast center. So, Aaron, what are some of the major talking points each candidate will likely focus on during tonight's debate?
Vlad, good to be with you. Happy debate day. For J.D. Vance, we're going to expect him to kind of cut into the moderate brand Tim Walz has portrayed himself as and paint him as too far left. We're already seeing material from the Trump campaign suggesting they're going to go after Walz's response to the riots in Minneapolis in the summer of 2020. On the other side, Tim Walz is expected to tie J.D. Vance to Project 2025, specifically his ties writing the foreword for one of the architect's books. Also expected to bring up the topics of abortion and also note Vance's repeated rhetoric about Haitian immigrants that, of course, popped up at the last debate between Harris and Trump.
So, Aaron, how are the candidates prepared for tonight?
So we know that both have been doing intensive prep in mock debates. Tim Walz has been in Michigan. J.D. Vance has Minnesota Congressman Tom Emmer playing the role of Walz during those mock debates. So we know they've been studying and preparing going into this. And I'm really going to be looking to see how J.D. Vance convinces those more moderate Republicans. If you look at our own CBS News polling, only 30% of Republicans who don't identify with MAGA, who aren't necessarily deep Trump supporters, only 30% say they are enthusiastic about J.D. Vance being the running mate pick. How he talks to those moderate voters, maybe new Republicans, maybe those in the suburbs, is something I'm going to be watching, and it's probably something they've been prepping for.
All right, Aaron Navarro in the spin room for us. Thanks, Aaron. And don't forget, join us right here at 4 p.m. Eastern tonight for a special vice presidential debate edition of America Decides. And at 8 p.m., CBS News will broadcast a special report leading into the only vice presidential debate at 9 p.m. Eastern right here in New York City. And you can follow along online and on social media for fact-checking from our CBS News Confirmed team. We're following breaking news out of the Middle East, where a senior White House official says that the U.S. has indications that Iran is planning to imminently launch a missile attack on Israel. This comes as Israel says its forces have begun targeted ground operations inside Lebanon, marking a dramatic escalation in the country's offensive against the Hezbollah militant group. CBS News foreign correspondent Chris Livesay joins us now from Tel Aviv. Chris, what more do we know about the events unfolding on Israel's northern border?
Hey there, Vlad. Well, you know, they possibly could be unfolding everywhere across Israel as we speak, if indeed, as you mentioned, Iran might be mounting a missile attack. In fact, according to the IDF spokesman, that's the spokesman for the Israeli military, just a moment ago, he said that our U.S. partners informed us that they detect Iran's estimates of firing missiles in the near future. At this point, we still do not detect an aerial threat launched from Iran towards Israel. I should mention, this is something we've been bracing for ever since events started to unfold almost 2 weeks ago, starting with those exploding beepers that followed up with that senior leadership of Hezbollah be taken out, and then culminating in the assassination of the leader of Hezbollah himself, Hassan Nasrallah. The fact that Hezbollah hasn't retaliated with thousands of missiles like we've been expecting, and the fact that Iran hasn't done so either is surprising many people here in the region.
Chris, what's your understanding from speaking to officials on the ground and just your sense of covering this conflict for as long as you have, the possibility of not just this ground invasion of Lebanon, and so far it's been kept to the northern borders of Israel, but the fact if Iran does get involved here, that has major implications, not just for the Middle East, but for here in the United States as well. In other words, American geopolitical strategies going forward in the region.
Yeah, that's right. Let's remember why Iran is involved to begin with. Hezbollah is an Iran-backed group, and for the past 11 months, Hezbollah has been hammering Israel's northern border. There have been approximately 70,000 Israelis displaced in the process. It's been a pretty low-temperature war throughout that time, and it was only in the past 2 weeks, as I mentioned, that Israel turned up the temperature. That is signal to everybody in the region that enough is enough. In fact, that's a direct quote from Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. They've taken the gloves off. Now, the United States, the White House, is saying that it's time for a de-escalation. There should be a ceasefire taking place. But it's clear by Israel's actions, they're mounting buildup at the border, which we've seen. We saw dozens and dozens of armored vehicles, armored bulldozers, tanks, virtually everything you would expect if you were mounting a ground invasion. It's clear that Israel has come to a point where it feels the best way to de-escalate this war is to win it.
Chris, U.S. military assets in the region, including the United States Navy, helped to thwart missile attacks on Israel a few weeks back. The question is, of course, if Iran does plan to strike Israel, would they be doing it directly or through their proxies?
Oh, that's a very good question. I mean, we actually interviewed a rocket scientist here in Israel that worked on Israel's own missile defenses and its missile offenses. And he told us one of the most striking thing following these escalations in Lebanon, going after the Hezbollah leadership and its missile launcher sites, is that they haven't been able to retaliate. Hezbollah has not been able to retaliate with thousands of missiles. I mean, we've been told that they had approximately 100,000, 150,000 missiles at its disposal. We just haven't seen any retaliation like that. He estimates it's because they've simply been decapitated when it comes to their leadership, and also getting orders down now to the people who man those launchers is virtually impossible. And then you have the problem of finding somebody who's brave enough to stick his neck out there to actually fire those weapons. So it seems that Hezbollah, this long arm of Iran, has been severely compromised. And now the big question is, indeed, if they're out of the game, if they can't fire back like we've been anticipating, does that mean Iran will feel compelled to?
Very pertinent questions. Chris Livesay in Tel Aviv for us this morning. Chris, as always, my friend, thank you very much. Stay safe. Right now, in the news, of course, this morning, reports are that Iran is potentially going to launch a missile attack on the state of Israel. We don't have that confirmation yet, but that is the word that is coming in from military sources. We're going to continue to follow these developments on the ground and, of course, bring them to you as warranted. Meanwhile, let's talk about here at home what's going on with U.S. imports, which are now at a standstill during a labor contract standoff between dock workers and companies. At least 25,000 union workers from up and down the East Coast are on strike. CBS News senior transportation correspondent Chris Van Cleve is live from one of those major shipping ports in New Jersey. Chris, it's good to see you. President Biden, as you know, is trying to nudge an agreement. He is not going to invoke, as you reported earlier, the requirement that those workers go back on the job. But what else has the White House said about this morning?
You know, the White House has consistently said over the last few days that they want both sides at the table. They want a deal that's good for everybody, and that they support workers' rights to organize, collectively bargain, and now to strike. You're right. The president has the legal authority to order these longshoremen back to work, but he says he's not going to do it. He doesn't believe in the Taft-Hartley Act. He doesn't want to do it. What that means is you have thousands of port workers from Maine to Texas who are on the picket line this morning. There had been some progress in the negotiations last night, we understand, that counter proposals were exchanged. However, Longshoremen's Union felt that the deals weren't good enough. They were still too far apart. So at midnight, folks walked off the job, not only here at the Port of New Jersey and New York, one of the second busiest in the country, the busiest on the East Coast, but at 14 ports up and down the East Coast and into the Gulf Coast. What does that mean? It means goods stop coming and going from the East Coast. Anything that wasn't unloaded, all of those containers back there that have anything in them are going to be sitting there until this strike is over. So whatever is inside there, it's locked down and secured, but it's not moving.
So it's only been a day of a pause, as you know, Chris, but one day can have incredible ripple effects across the U.S. economy, and especially for consumers at home. Companies have been trying to get ahead, of course, of that fallout. I know that things are coming in to the West Coast, which isn't affected by this strike, but describe what you're hearing from officials about those potential ripple effects.
Yeah, so it really depends on how long this strike goes. This strike was well foreseen by businesses. Negotiations have been essentially stalled since June. So you had a lot of businesses that have been bringing in additional inventory in the weeks leading up to this, and we know there was a near round-the-clock effort to get things unloaded and out of the port, whether by rail or by trucks, ahead of this deadline. So that the goods that can be stockpiled, if you will, have been. The question is, like, you can only stockpile perishables, for example, for so long before they start to perish, right? You know, you can't bring in a month's worth of bananas and have them last for 2 months. They just won't. So that's where people will start to see things first. But that's still several days away, Vlad. So if this is solved by the end of the week, the impact relatively minor. If it stretches into weeks, that's when we see a disrupted supply chain.
Yeah, and I know you'll be covering it all for us. Chris Van Cleef for us this morning in Newark, New Jersey. Thanks, Chris. All right, the death toll continues to rise, and hundreds remain unaccounted for in the aftermath of Hurricane Helene. We'll have the very latest on the recovery efforts. You're streaming CBS News 24/7. All right, folks, check it out. This is a little behind the scenes for you. This is where the CBS News vice presidential debate will be held tonight, right here in the CBS News Broadcast Center. There you see the preparations are underway for that debate. We've got the spin room where some of the candidates and the candidate surrogates, we should say, will appear to speak to our reporters and other reporters. We're going to journey here to 57th Street for this first and only vice presidential debate between Governor Tim Walz of Minnesota and Senator J.D. Vance of Ohio. You're not going to want to miss it. That debate starts at 9 p.m. Eastern right here on CBS, streaming on CBS 24/7, and you can also stream it on Paramount Plus. We're going to keep looking into those photos to show you some of the behind-the-scenes prep that is happening right here. But for now, let's move on to some other news. Let's talk about Hurricane Helene. This has been 5 days now since that hurricane tore through the southeast. Rescue workers are still, can you believe it, still searching for hundreds who remain missing. And millions of people, 5 days later, still are without power. President Biden is set to travel to North Carolina tomorrow to survey the damage as rescue workers grapple with widespread flooding and collapsing roads along with infrastructure. CBS News correspondent Skylar Henry is live from Sawanoa, North Carolina, and he's been reporting from there all morning long. Earlier this morning, Skylar, on CBS Mornings, you showed us some of the damage, including businesses where the material that the businesses had tons of that stuff strewn out onto the roads, let alone businesses. Let's talk about the scope of the damage you're seeing for people's homes.
Yeah, so this community, Sawanoa, is about 5,000 people wide and large, if you will. What we heard from people, not only with businesses behind me, like that you see here, damaged, but also from those who have homes on this side of the street, all of their materials, if not most of it, washed away, and now they're picking up the pieces and trying to clean up as much as they can. This roadway here also washed away. You can see just how high the water levels reached on this building right here. And I think that is what people here say that they didn't anticipate this entire time. They didn't expect for this to be as bad as it ultimately became. And the real issue now is people in this community say that they are in desperate need of supplies. That's food, That's water. In some instances, that's cell phone service. We know that there have been federal partners that have announced that they are sending truckloads of both food and water by the day into North Carolina. The FEMA response also includes sending in more Starlink satellite signals and services for those who might need to contact loved ones to let them know that they are okay. You talked about some of those that may be missing, those hundreds or so that may be out there. Search and rescue crews, both in the air and on the ground, are working around the clock to try to get to as many people as they can to check on their well-being.
All right, Skylar Henry reporting for us this morning. Skylar, thank you very much. Let us bring in CBS News Philadelphia meteorologist Grant Gilmore with the first look at the national forecast. Grant.
Hey, good morning, Vlad. You know, for the first time since Helene hit most of western North Carolina, the rivers are out of flood stage. There's still a couple of flood warnings, but now all that water continues to rush to the ocean. Several flood warnings, and in fact, a lot of rivers in flood stage into the low country of South Carolina, where some of those rivers may not even crest until Saturday. So water's rising for places closer to the coast. And speaking of water's rising, some showers, storms expected across the Florida Peninsula, as well as portions of eastern Virginia into parts of North Carolina today. Some places could see some flash flooding. It's a marginal risk, but still, this is across parts of the state that doesn't need more rainfall just because of that water running down river into some of those flooded rivers and closer to the ocean. Also, marginal risk for flash flooding in places that got a lot of damage from Helene last week as well across central Florida. So a couple of areas to watch there for some flash flooding. The rest of the country, well, you go back into the plains and into the high plains and mountains, it is either cooler than normal into the northern tier state up towards Minnesota, the northern Midwest, but then you head back into the high plains and the Rockies. Very warm conditions. We'll talk about this later, but Phoenix enduring a whole week of record heat. Temperatures there 100 to 115 degrees, mild weather across the Northwest. That's something to keep an eye on, as well as the tropics. We'll talk more about the tropics as well, but high temperatures across the entire country today. Atlanta around 80 degrees, showers as a cold front pushes to the east with cooler, more fall-like air on the way for the second half of the week. Vlad, the tropics heating up. We'll track that coming up here in just a little bit.
All right, Grant, we'll check in with you a little bit. Thanks so much. Appreciate it.
Okay.
Smoke is still billowing from a fire at a chemical plant outside of Atlanta that started on Sunday. Authorities say the fire was ignited when a sprinkler head malfunctioned, causing water to mix with a water-reactive chemical. But officials in Georgia say there is no hazardous levels of chlorine in the air. The Environmental Protection Agency and the State Environmental Protection Division did find the chemical after the fire ignited during air quality surveys, but officials say they did not reach dangerous levels. Now evacuation orders have been lifted and residents can now return to their homes. A school bus with dozens of young students and teachers caught on fire in Thailand. At least 25 are feared dead. What we know about the incident just ahead. You're streaming CBS News 24/7. Here's a look at some of the top stories we are following. A school bus fire in Bangkok has killed at least 25 students and teachers. Officials say 44 people were on board for a school trip when a fire erupted, sending more than a dozen passengers to the hospital. The students reportedly range from elementary to junior high school age. It's a terrible story. A rescuer who responded to the scene says a tire explosion likely sparked the deadly fire. The bus driver is said to have survived, but appeared to flee the scene and has yet to be found. California Governor Gavin Newsom signed a bill banning so-called legacy and donor preferences at private colleges starting next fall. Stanford, USC, and other private schools will not be able to give extra consideration to applicants who are related to alumni or who are big donors. USC says it will comply with the law, which takes effect in about a year. Stanford said it will continue to review its admissions policies until the law takes effect. Governor Newsom said the ban will promote educational opportunities. You are looking at military video of a dangerous incident over Alaska. That is a Russian fighter jet that just swooped in just feet from an American F-16. Look at that. Okay, it was an F-16 that was, there you go. There's the shot that we were looking for. See that fighter jet swooping past that F-16 there. This is coming after a series of Russian incursions into Alaska air defense zones, which sits just outside of U.S. airspace. The Pentagon has called this incident unsafe and unprofessional. You think? Not a good look. All right, back now to our breaking news out of the Middle East. A senior White House official says that the United States believes Iran is preparing to imminently launch a missile attack against Israel. I want to bring in CBS News White House reporter Willie James Inman to talk about this. Good to see you, Willie James. So what is the White House saying about this potential strike on Israel by Iran, which is something we haven't seen, at least not directly?
Hey there, Vlad. Good to be with you. That's right. The White House is sending out this warning that Iran is preparing some type of imminent missile attack against Israel. Let me read that statement from a senior White House official. It says the United States has indications that Iran is preparing to imminently launch a ballistic missile attack against Israel. We are actively supporting defensive preparations to defend Israel against this attack. And Vlad, this is the more important part here. A direct military attack from Iran against Israel will carry severe consequences for Iran. So it's important to point out that the U.S. does have assets in the region. Our colleague Charlie D'Agata is reporting, and those assets include more assets that were in place compared to the April attack that we saw against Israel from Iran, when dozens of missiles and drones were launched in response to an Israeli attack on a consulate in Syria, on an Iranian consulate in Syria, I should say. This is clearly showing all of those tensions in the region after Israel has launched a limited invasion of Lebanon in response to Hezbollah aggression, as well as their ongoing war against Hamas in the Gaza Strip. So the White House closely watching this situation, Vlad, and saying that the United States will come to the aid of Israel if they are attacked by Iran.
Willie James, let me ask you if you are hearing anything from the White House about any diplomatic efforts to curtail what we've seen happening across the Middle East. I know that the Biden administration, one of the things that President Biden said when he chose to step aside to let Kamala Harris become the top of the ticket for the race for the presidency was that he wanted to focus, as part of his legacy, trying to end the wars that we've seen, not only between Israel and Gaza, but to prevent a wider war from spreading to other countries in the Middle East. So what are you hearing about any kind of diplomatic efforts to sort of get that under wraps?
Yeah, well, the United States has been working with allies and partners, not only in the region, but European allies as well. Remember, after, I should say, on the sidelines of the UN General Assembly, the United States was working with those nations to come up with a ceasefire plan that would call for 21 days of a ceasefire between Israel and Hezbollah. I'll also note that on top of that, they were hoping to come up with a ceasefire, of course, to return those Israeli hostages to Israel, between Israel and Hamas. That ongoing conflict there. Those negotiations still, of course, continue, but the ceasefire deal between Hezbollah and Israel seems scuttled for the most part, because the Israelis have continued to push forward with this operation, this limited invasion of Lebanon, seeking to push back the aggression there along the Lebanon and the Lebanese and Israeli border. But still, nonetheless, the White House saying that they will come and assist Israel if it's attacked by Iran. Let's remember that Iran funds and helps a lot of these enemies of Israel in the region. But clearly, this is a situation that we'll have to wait and see what happens. But the White House saying today in this statement that they are seeing indications that Iran is preparing some type of missile attack against Israel, Vlad.
All right, Willie James Inman reporting from the White House for us this morning. Thank you, Willie James. I want to bring in CBS News senior national security correspondent Charlie D'Agata, who's joining us now from the Pentagon. Charlie, what are your sources saying at the Pentagon about this potential imminent strike by Iran on the state of Israel?
Yes, well, the Pentagon language is that they're not steering us away from it, so sort of confirming that that information is accurate coming from the White House and others. Some of that's based on their own intelligence that they gather here in this building, but also on intelligence that they're getting from IDF. There have been several announcements in the past few days of bolstering troops, U.S. troops in the region in defense of Israel, but just as importantly, the defense of U.S. forces that are scattered throughout the region, some 40,000 U.S. forces. And if you want, I can give you chapter and verse. I've just been running around the building to see what's there, what's new, and what's happening.
So, Charlie, as someone who's covered the region for many, many years, just for our viewers to understand, typically when Iran strikes at Israel, they use their proxies. Is that what we expect this time around, or do we expect that Iran will directly, if this does happen, strike targets in Israel?
There are indications that this time it will be Iran itself, similar to what we saw on April 13th. And that doesn't mean it will be a one-man show for that either. I mean, Hezbollah is still capable despite the losses that they've suffered and the fact that they're under attack at the moment. The Houthis have increased attacks, including attacks against U.S. forces, or at least attempted attacks against U.S. forces. And then, of course, you have to keep in mind Iranian-backed militia in places like Iraq and Syria, where there is a U.S. troop footprint there, and they have come under increased attack. So it's not just about providing defense for Israel itself, but in defense of U.S. forces. But this time, yeah, as you mentioned, it's not just Iranian-backed militias or Hezbollah. This will be Iran itself, is what they're expecting.
Charlie D'Agata for us at the Pentagon. Charlie, I know you're covering the story all day long. If something happens that you hear, you know what to do. Raise your hand. We've got a camera on that position where you are, and we'll come to you live right here on CBS News 24/7, my friend. Thank you.
I'll be here, Vlad. Thanks.
All right, brother. Let's talk politics now. Vice President Harris will take part in briefings in Washington today, while her running mate, of course, Governor Tim Walz, heads right here to New York City for tonight's debate right here on CBS News. So I want to bring in CBS News political correspondent Caitlin Huey-Burns for more on what is happening with the Harris campaign. So, Caitlin, we've been talking about this all morning long, but what more can you add to how Governor Walz has been preparing for this evening? And are there any talking points that could come up that could be an issue for the campaign to address? Of course, we know that J.D. Vance is going to hit Walz on immigration. He's going to hit Walz on military preparedness. But the question, of course, is how is Governor Walz prepared to address those issues when they come up? Because I can just sort of imagine a world where the bulk of what J.D. Vance is talking about is immigration and inflation, even though inflation has come down.
Right, Vlad, good to see you. Yeah, the spotlight is on the undercard tonight, and both candidates have been preparing with their heads down for the past several days, focused on this debate, which could be the last debate that we see for any candidate on this ticket, given that Donald Trump has declined further debates. What's interesting about Walz is that a lot of the attacks have been already previewed. The Vance team has told us that they want to go after his military record and basically use him as a proxy to go after Kamala Harris. Now, they also argue, the Vance team argues, that Walz is a skilled debater in their view, that he's had a lot of practice at this, having run for Congress, having run for governor. And so they are trying to kind of set expectations high for their opponent. Now, on the other side, J.D. Vance is also, while he's new to the Senate, he has also practiced at this. Talking to sources within the Vance team, they say that he has given lots and lots of press conferences nearly daily, has done lots and lots of interviews, and that has been a big part of his preparation, that he knows what is going to come at him and he knows how to handle it. But it's so fascinating, Vlad, because covering the Trump campaign, Vance and Trump prepare very differently. Trump likes to say that he doesn't need debate prep. Vance, however, has been very much focused on preparing for this debate. They've had lots of Zoom and kind of what they call murder board sessions that include his wife. They also, at the end of last week, had a mock debate in which Minnesota Republican Congressman Tim Emmer served as the stand-in for Walz. And the Vance team was very impressed with how Emmer did, Tom Emmer. And so that has been part of the prep for this. Vance has been very much focused on preparing for this, unlike Donald Trump, who likes to say that he kind of uses the campaign trail as his preparation.
Caitlin Huey-Burns, really interesting. Thank you so much. We appreciate you, my friend. All right, let's bring in CBS News immigration and politics reporter Camilo Montoya Galvez, who's following the Trump campaign. Camilo, you're in Springfield, Ohio, which of course became a major focal point because of the comments from Senator Vance and former President Trump about Haitian immigrants. Vance has not backed down from those comments in any interviews that he's done. What are the residents telling you about what that kind of scrutiny and that kind of language, that kind of hateful language, has done to folks in the community?
Good morning, Vlad. To date, J.D. Vance has yet to correct the record about his comments about the Haitian community here in Springfield, Ohio. And obviously, he has been giving a lot of oxygen to false claims that Haitian immigrants here were eating or harming pets by local residents, saying that constituents of his were calling his office reporting this. But of course, those claims have been not only debunked and disproven by local authorities here in Springfield, but also by Republican lawmakers in the state, including Governor DeWine, who is, of course, a Republican and who is supporting Vance and former President Donald Trump in this election. And in addition to those incendiary claims, Vance has also called the Haitian immigrants here, Vlad, illegal aliens, despite the fact that these are immigrants who enter the country lawfully and are in the U.S. legally under Biden administration programs that allow people to enter the country lawfully. One of those programs allows Haitians and other nationalities to fly here to the U.S. if they have American-based sponsors and they come here legally. And the other program allows people in Mexico to get an appointment to be processed legally at an official border crossing along the U.S.-Mexico border. And both of these policies, Vlad, allow people to work here lawfully. And they are coming here, Vlad, because not too long ago, Springfield was a town in economic decline, and there are many job openings here. And make no mistake, there are real challenges here. There has been a sudden and sharp increase in Haitian arrivals here, and that has strained local resources. The schools, of course, Vlad, have to absorb children from Haiti who don't speak English for the most part. Local hospitals and affordable housing here are limited, and so those are real policy challenges, and there is a legitimate policy debate to have about those issues. But of course, the more incendiary claims have been debunked, are not true, and can be dangerous, as we saw with the threats that many of the buildings here, including schools, received after those claims surfaced online. And so it's unclear if J.D. Vance will correct the record, Vlad, but we here at CBS News will certainly try to do that.
Yeah, and there's something else I want to ask you about, Camilo, with regards to that, is you cover immigration and you know this very, very well. It's not the point that is being made that there are city resources that are being strained in Springfield, Ohio. Of course they are whenever you absorb a large influx of immigrants. The question is the specific type of language that was used specifically with regards to Haitians, which you don't see, for example, when, for example, Ukrainians or other Europeans decide to settle in a particular town in the United States. And you know as well as I do, you probably know better than I do, that we've seen immigrants not just from countries that are black countries like Haiti or countries in Africa. There are Europeans and others from Latin and Central America who are coming into the United States as well, but you don't see that type of language being utilized, at least not in your reporting, if you haven't covered any type of language similar to what we heard from Trump and Vance about Haitian immigrants.
No, that is an excellent point. Unbeknownst to most Americans, Vlad, the U.S. has resettled tens of thousands of Ukrainian refugees following the start of the war and the Russian invasion there, and that has provoked little backlash and little political outcry. Former President Donald Trump and J.D. Vance have not talked about refugees from Ukraine, posing these same challenges. So it is an inconsistent messaging that these candidates have had about immigrants, depending on where they are from, for sure.
Well, thank you so much for clearing the record for us, as always, my friend. Appreciate your reporting. Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
All right, this is a live picture from the spin room right here at the CBS News Broadcast Center. Coming up, we're going to take a closer look at the preps underway right now, right here for tonight's debate. You're streaming CBS News 24/7. Live pictures coming into the CBS News Broadcast Center from right outside the CBS News Broadcast Center right here in New York City. In just a few hours, both vice presidential candidates will arrive here to prepare for tonight's debate at 9 p.m. Eastern. You can see some crowds are already starting to gather. There will be some street closures in the area. So if you live in New York City, try to avoid West 57th Street if I were you. CBS News Newspath correspondent Jared Hill is outside the CBS Broadcast Center right now, and he joins me to talk about what he's seeing. So Jared, I do see some people starting to congregate. I see that the barriers have already put up. Yeah. Traffic is still flowing, but that's not going to continue in a few hours.
Oh, yeah, definitely, Vlad. I mean, security out in front of the broadcast center is going to be tighter than a mouse's belly button over the next couple of hours. The barricades are not just to keep people from walking on that side casually. You have to have various credentials and badges to get into that barricaded section along the broadcast center. Inside the broadcast center, as we see these candidates coming in later on this evening, there are going to be Secret Service checkpoints. No deliveries allowed inside. All of this really just showcasing how high the security is, not just because this is a debate, but especially a debate in the political season that we're in right now, where there has been such heated rhetoric and also those threats against at least one of these presidential candidates.
All right, Jared Hill outside for us this morning in preparation for the debate, which will happen this evening, the one and only vice presidential debate between Governor Tim Walz and Senator J.D. Vance of Ohio. You can join us right here starting at 4 p.m. Eastern for a special vice presidential debate edition of America Decides. And at 8 p.m., CBS News will broadcast a special report leading into the debate, which is at 9 p.m. Eastern right here. And you can also follow along online and on social media for fact-checking from our CBS News Confirmed team. Still ahead, remembering a baseball legend. A look back on the life and the legacy of Pete Rose, Charlie Hustle. You're streaming CBS News 24/7. A milestone and history-making birthday for the nation's 39th president. Jimmy Carter is 100 years old today. He is now the first president in U.S. history to hit the century mark. Family members say Carter's birthday wish is to vote for Vice President Harris in the presidential election. He's already a cancer survivor and underwent brain surgery after a fall back in 2019. And he's also a widower. They were showing there his beloved wife of nearly 60 years, Rosalind Carter. And take a look at this. In honor of the former president's birthday, the White House unveiled a special sign on the lawn to celebrate Jimmy Carter. Let's talk about legendary Major League Baseball player Pete Rose, who has now died at the age of 83. He is considered one of baseball's greats who has an unrivaled list of achievements, but he also has a very, very complicated legacy. CBS News Los Angeles reporter Jim Hill has more.
There weren't many better on the baseball field than Pete Rose. He's Major League Baseball's all-time hit king, a 17-time All-Star at 5 positions, and a 3-time World Series champion. Known as Charlie Hustle, Rose played in more Major League games than any other player. But off the field, he was often the subject of turmoil and controversy, including a lifetime ban from baseball for gambling on the sport. Born on April 14, 1941 in Cincinnati, Ohio, Pete Rose made his Major League debut 6 days shy of his 22nd birthday for his hometown Reds. And his career began in a hurry, winning National League Rookie of the Year honors in 1963. He took home MVP honors in 1973 and led the Reds to 5 division championships, 4 National League pennants, and 2 World Series championships. The first in 1975, when Pete also was named World Series MVP, and again in 1976. Then after 16 seasons in Cincinnati, Rose joined the Philadelphia Phillies in 1979, winning the third of his 3 World Series rings the very next year. In 1984, Rose rejoined the Reds, where he assumed the role of player-manager and is still the last player to do so. Following his retirement, Rose continued on as manager of the Reds, but on August 24, 1989, Rose received a lifetime ban for gambling on games while he was still a player and managing. That rendered him ineligible for the Hall of Fame. Inarguably, one of the best ever to play the game of baseball. Rose never received the reinstatement he was looking for, and to this day remains banned from the Hall of Fame despite a legendary 24-year career on the diamond.
All right, let's bring in CBS News Philadelphia meteorologist Grant Gilmore with the last look at the national forecast. But before we dig into that, Grant, Pete Rose should be in the Hall of Fame or not? I know it's an age-old question for fans of the game.
Oh, it really is, man. You know, I think it's almost like that's his legacy, you know, not being in the Hall of Fame. So I don't know. I don't know why change anything now. I don't know. It's a like you said, age-old conversation, age-old debate, which will probably continue on for baseball history. Let's talk about the forecast, guys, as we let you go into the rest of your morning. I do want to talk about the Southeast, though, because we continue to deal with flood warnings after all the rainfall that fell over parts of western North Carolina, South Carolina. All that flood water is now rushing to the ocean. So a lot of these rivers are still in flood stage and then cresting closer to the coastal South Carolina. They will not crest until Saturday. Meanwhile, we still have heavy rainfall over portions of Virginia into eastern North Carolina. And let me take you down to Florida, too. Areas in central Florida that got the eastern fringe of Helene, they don't need rain. They get rain today, and they'll actually be working with the potential for some flooding as they go throughout this afternoon. Around the rest of the country, well, there is more shower activity moving through the eastern half of the United States. That will then clear out for some cooler conditions that is already moving into portions of the northern tier states. Very warm across the southern plains, but I'm telling you, just scorching heat back into places like Phoenix, Vegas, and all through a good portion of California, where record temperatures, especially in the Phoenix area, not only today, tomorrow, but likely through the weekend into next week. Vlad, back to you.
All right, Grant, thank you very much, my friend. An encore of CBS Mornings coming up next. This is CBS News 24/7.